Okay, so that's one of the big news in the oil industry. Nigeria's oil industry, just watching on Nigeria's junior oil minister, Dr. Ibe Kachiko, says they're now chasing oil thieves electronically, that the government and the EFCC now have a system that tracks oil production, every barrel, and all those vessels lifting Nigeria's crude oil. And that system will be extended to the downstream sector sometime in the future. But first, let's deal with the guys where we do oil production. That's what the Honorable Minister of State for Petroleum Resources told the audience at the Pan-African Petroleum Congress taking place in Abuja. Says the DPR is finalizing what you call forensic analysis that shows every vessel coming into Nigeria, what they're doing in the country, and where they're going when they lift crude oil. There's no hiding place. But this is part of the big story in Nigeria's oil sector. But of course, the global oil industry has a lot of dynamics, and that is part of the conversation we're having this morning right here on the program with one of the investment research analysts at Afrinvest, Adeoluwa Eweje. Thank you very much for coming on the program. It's good to see you.
Thank you for having me, boss.
Great. We'll get to the chasing the oil thieves a little bit later in the conversation. But let's start with the global space. Okay. When we talk about the oil and gas industry, or hydrocarbon, as we technically want to put it. Yes. So, what's the big story here as far as the dynamics for the upstream sector is over the last year, 2018, so that we don't go too far with a bit of outlook for the new year?
Yeah, so post the moderation in the global glut in oil prices due to the supply, we saw oil investors basically being careful, taking a cautious outlook in terms of investment. You know, and then 2017 we saw a rally in oil prices that it got into 2018. You know, after which it got to a 2-year high in October, where we had about $88, which actually surprised many analysts. You know, so what we've seen essentially is that while the balance of demand versus supply will always be the major factor that the oil and gas operators will consider in making different business decisions, the immeasurable impact, that's of the geopolitics of the oil and gas industry, that remains what will always change the game.
It's very amazing.
Yes.
That everyone's saying, look, we got to get out of dirty fuel,
yes,
or dirty energy, which is hydrocarbon.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to have electric cars, yes, and all of that. Mm-hmm. Yet there's so much fight over crude oil.
Yes.
So that means that crude oil isn't going anywhere, at least not anytime soon.
Yes, I agree with you. I mean, crude oil still accounts for over 40% of the world's energy consumption, and that's not going to change anytime soon. Significant development have gone over the years to establish infrastructure that are actually designed to consume fossil fuel. So before you can change to renewables or change to electricity, it's going to take a while. But we are seeing an increasing adoption. So oil and gas operators, investors are actually careful. They are beginning to retime their investments because they know that the end is actually closer than has been previously anticipated.
Mm. But again, we still have this fossil fuel, as it were,
yes,
with us. So whoever has it,
yes,
is still a major player.
Yes.
We're still talking. Some folks are saying perhaps in the next few years, China may start to be a big player there, taking on the United States on one hand. Look at what is happening in Venezuela. Everybody still believes that crude oil or hydrocarbon is still big business because you can't really separate oil from gas.
Yes, you're actually right. For many reasons. So for China, they do not necessarily have the internal capacity to generate crude oil, but they have the ability to leverage on their investment that is across the globe to be able to influence the dynamics of production. And then gas has actually, has been recognized as the most environmentally friendly fossil fuel. So it's essentially the energy of the future. Over the past 2 years, it has seen an increasing adoption. It's one of the reasons why we see Qatar taking a bow out of OPEC, you know, and choosing to optimize their gas export. Egypt, the Egyptian market has been doing quite well for the last couple of months. They are one of the markets under the African radar that have actually sustained their positive performance, largely due to gas exports.
Morocco, Algeria.
Yes, Morocco as well. Even for us too, our LNG, they've been doing quite well. They're even looking to expand to 27, and that's significant investment.
So that is that, but we still need to optimize crude oil, which is the energy of today and the cash cow of today for almost every economy, even the United States with the shale gas. They can't turn their back on that. The entire Permian Basin, whatever you call it for Britain, the North Sea, whatever, is all about, or to cover the Russians and the Barents Sea where oil and all that is found. So it's quite huge in terms of oil. So it's a big story for Nigeria as well.
Yes, it is. So what you see in countries like Saudi Arabia and Russia is that they've developed the capacity to quickly increase their oil production when the prices are right, and when they can merge the demand for such. So that's one of the things Nigeria should work on. We've not been able to, even at the before the oil sanctions, which the agreement between OPEC and non-OPEC, which also meant that we also had to take a cut back in our oil production, we were barely able to sustain the 2 million barrels per day. And that's shy. I mean, it's a far cry from our capacity.
Why are we locked into this 2 million barrels per day for the last 10 years or so, at least as far as I can remember, over the last 20 years? Even during the Obasanjo's administration, we're just around the 2 million barrels per day. Of course, the militants came and shut us down to, I think, about 900,000 at some point, at the height of militants during the Obasanjo's 8-year period. So we're just within the 2 million band. What's the key issue here for Nigeria? Is it investment? Is it legislation? Is it governance? Is it politics? What is it?
It's been a mix of all you've mentioned. The biggest factor being legislation, essentially. As you know, the PIGP has been on for forever, essentially. And that has actually cautioned investors in terms of taking advantage of any oil and gas assets that you might have in Nigeria. We remain one of the preferred destinations for oil and gas investment because our oil has less sulfur content, which means a higher margin for investors. But with a lack of clarity with regards to our legislation, which is for the industry going forward, investors would want to know what their ROI would be before they move into any sort of investment. So that has been a major challenge. And of course, like you mentioned, geopolitical tensions in the East with pipeline vandalism. I mean, one of the major challenges of oil operators is not being able to evacuate their oil. In 2016, when we had the Focados issue, a lot of companies, including Seplat, was actually affected. I mean, their uptime was barely 20% of the whole year. And that is a huge revenue loss, from what was projected. So we've had issues like that, which have all added up to this whole mess. But if we can take a consistent, holistic approach into providing solutions into these issues, we believe that the needed investment will be actually attracted and we'll begin to see these guys come back.
We've been trying to engineer investment growth with existing legislation.
Yes.
Ministry of Petroleum Resources, the NNPC group, trying to keep our existing oil partners in place and try to bring in new ones, in particular, well, at some point, indigenous oil oil producers like Seplat, Oando, and the rest of them. But we've not been able to move as much as other regions are moving.
Yes.
And you said because of legislation.
Essentially, because if you compare our country with other oil-producing countries, if you look at Angola, for instance, who recently increased their production significantly. I mean, they too have their challenges, but there's better clarity there. And then one of the things that we no longer have in our favor is we are not the only players around anymore. We are the only player rather. I mean, we have increasing discoveries across other regions, and they're also looking to attract investment, and we'll probably even take lesser royalties or profit, petroleum profit tax, cut. So you find investors in the oil and gas sector having an increasing number of opportunities to consider before even making a decision. So essentially what we are saying, or what our report is actually putting out, is that time is of the essence. And is actually in line with our general outlook for 2019 on the precipice, which means that we're at a point where we really need to make a decision. Otherwise, it would be difficult for us to... Not
much of a decision will be taken on the PIB until the elections and swearing in are over.
Yes.
So we could just as well bid goodbye to the first half of this year and hope, quote unquote, that the second half would... legislature and the executive will try to sing from the same hymn book to get the PIB up in place. Again, this is one factor you laid out very clear, because competition is coming.
Yes.
Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire,
yes.
the entire
the
West
entire
African curve,
yes,
including little productions in Cameroon
yes.
and all the way down to Angola, the Gulf of Guinea. It's all footprints. Everybody's seeking oil, no matter how small, how small it is. Even Rwanda is just thinking about. Even Rwanda is hoping to get some oil and gas up, and they can use some oil money if they can find it, and they're working very hard at it. But if you look at the oil price, which is also another major issue within the dynamics of the oil space. How far do you think we've gone in the last 1 year, and what's the outlook? So
in the last 1 year, we saw a rally. Actually, it began in 2017, and it reached an all-time high on the 3rd of October. That was in 2018, to about $88.13 per barrel. And then after then, it actually declined. So what happened essentially was that the market anticipated that the impact of the sanctions, of the US sanction on Iran crude exports, would significantly affect the supply of oil in the market. I mean, Iran owns, they have a significant share in terms of oil production. So they had anticipated ahead that that will lead to an hike in oil prices and sought to take advantage. So that actually drove up prices up to that point. But what we saw was that major energy-consuming countries such as India was able to secure waivers to be able to import oil from Iran. So essentially, what that factor or what investors anticipated was no longer the case, and as a result, oil prices started moderating.